Running an empire sounds brilliant until ships stop arriving, your factories run out of resources, and half the country decides it's time for a revolution. Lovely stuff. That is the sort of industrial age chaos Gilded Destiny is trying to capture. And I covered this game a while ago, but I wanted to return because its latest updates are starting to get my grand strategy spidey senses tingling. Naval warfare, scarce resources, political crises, an economy that can bring your entire empire to its knees. There's quite a lot to get excited about here. Hey everyone, my name is Tom and welcome back to LT Gaming. If you enjoy some grounded coverage of strategy and other types of games, do give the video a like and let YouTube know that grand strategy is here to stay. Right, now let's see whether Gilded Destiny could be Victoria 3's rival that we've all been waiting for. For those of you who are unfamiliar with Gilded Destiny, the basic premise is pretty straightforward. Pick a nation, guide it through the industrial age, and try to emerge as a global power without accidentally turning your country into an enormous politically unstable factory. The thing that's got its hooks into me with this game is how it wants to get specific about resources that drive transformation. You're not simply told that a province produces something like coal or iron and your numbers go up for your economy. Resources exist at a particular location on the map, and you're going to need to construct buildings directly on those deposits to extract them. And it might sound like a small distinction, but it starts to matter when you consider how unevenly those resources are distributed across the globe. The devs point to Sicily as their example, and its enormous importance to the global sulfur trade during this period. I had no idea. And if your industries need sulfur and you don't have it, suddenly you got to weigh up making trade agreements, diplomatic pressure, or maybe the slightly less friendly option of turning up with your army. Either way, a single resource can shape your foreign policy, and I really love this idea. It's not just about what you build, it's who actually owns it. Factories can be divided between private capitalists and the state, so the economy isn't necessarily just a simple choice between government control and free enterprise. You have competing interests wrapped up in the same industrial project. And I think the consequence of this will be individual provinces have a real strategic identity. One region might support your manufacturing, another could control a vital resource, and another might be the economic headache you spend the next 20 years trying to sort out. And this sounds really intriguing for us grand strategy fans. And of course, an industrial empire is only as secure as the trade routes keeping it supplied, which brings us to one of the more interesting recent updates I've seen, which is naval warfare. Often a problem point I feel for many grand strategy games. Fleets begin with military ports constructed in coastal cities controlled by the government. Those ports determine how many ships you can support and how quickly you can build them, so maintaining a powerful navy starts well before you ever fire a shot. There are several classes of vessel, from heavier warships and lighter patrol ships through to things like submarines, and they all have their own strengths and weaknesses. And of course you can have the option, like many games, to send them out on patrol or disrupt enemy trade, but even training them is going to come with a cost, as they're going to burn through supplies, so your magnificent battle fleet doesn't just appear fully prepared because you want to go to war this afternoon. Now, none of this is particularly groundbreaking, but there is one element that I particularly like, and that is the detection system. Enemy fleets simply aren't visible everywhere. You have to locate them and gather enough information to identify their position and strength. Only then can you bring them into battle. And the clever little wrinkle with this is you don't know how detectable your own fleets are, so you might think you're pulling off a strategic masterclass and quietly maneuvering into position. Meanwhile, your enemy has been watching it the entire time and is completely prepared for you. Of course, complexity is great, but none of it means anything if you can't understand what is happening. I'm looking at you, EU5 here. I think we all know that grand strategy games have the occasional habit of burying the most important information about 17 menus deep, and this is where Gilded Destiny's new situation system will come in. Situations are designed to track significant developments and make them visible to the player, so this could mean following a revolution as it unfolds, monitoring the balance between liberal and conservative movements, or keeping an eye on a major political shift before it becomes a bit of a problem for you. The devs point to events like the July Revolution and the Springtime of Nations, which suggested they aren't intended just to be isolated pop-ups that appear and disappear. I think the idea they're chasing is to show the forces beneath the surface so you can get a clearer sense what is driving them. And this same thinking extends to the event system more broadly. Events can respond to things like a new ruler taking power, or a war ending, or a building being constructed. So for us the players, I think in theory this means the stories emerging from your campaign should feel connected back to the world that you've created, rather than just random historical events dropping in because the calendar says so. It's still early in implementation and I think there's plenty left to prove here, but if it works it could be one of these features that makes all that economic and political complexity feel understandable and digestible rather than just overwhelming. But what I think will really matter with Gilded Destiny isn't any single system, it's what's going to happen when those systems start interfering with one another. A shortage of resources can slow your production, a blockade could make imports more expensive, expanding your military puts additional pressure on your finances, while the people working in your factories might not be thrilled about how all of this is affecting their lives. And Gilded Destiny seems keen to model those people in some quite minute detail. Populations will have different cultural and religious backgrounds, different jobs, positions within society. Those characteristics will influence the opportunities available to them, meaning industrialisation isn't simply about constructing more buildings, it's also going to be about managing who benefits from that growth and who gets left behind in the dust. Political parties, elections and government policies will all feed into this picture, so you can't just assume your population is going to quietly accept every decision because you think it's going to improve your national spreadsheet. Public happiness and support for the government will affect unrest, and if things go too far south you might be dealing with an outright revolution. So the challenge isn't going to be just a stronger nation, it's about holding together a society that has very different opinions about how things should actually look. Now I think there are still some very important questions that should be asked hanging over all of this. Gilded Destiny is clearly ambitious, and ambition can become a problem quite quickly when you're trying to simulate economies, populations, parties, resource distribution, and logistics across an entire globe. The interface needs to explain what's happening without drowning you in information. The AI needs to understand the same systems you do, and the economy needs to create interesting decisions without turning every campaign into some sort of accountancy placement. We know that some elements, including the situation system, are still evolving, while the devs have been reworking parts of the economy. So there's an important difference between what's been designed, what is playable, and what still needs to prove itself. That said, this isn't simply a concept and a hopeful Steam page. There's already a closed alpha in play with more than 1,000 testers, and a Hooded Horse are now part of this project, so I think these things all point in a positive direction. Now, none of this does guarantee a great game, obviously, but it does suggest there's a more substantial foundation here than just an attractive map and some enthusiastic promises. Ultimately, for me, what makes Gilded Destiny interesting isn't that it has factories, political parties, fleets, and a very large map. It's the possibility all of those systems might combine to tell a proper story about the nation that you are trying to build. Maybe your industrial expansion creates enormous wealth, but leaves sections of your population impoverished. Maybe the emergence of a critical resource shortage forces you into some awkward diplomatic agreements. Or maybe your carefully constructed empire starts to unravel because you assumed no one was going to blockade your ports. These are the sort of stories that grand strategy gamers love. And this is where the real potential is, the consequence of your decisions and the desperate improvisation wherein those decisions come back to haunt you. Whether Gilded Destiny can genuinely compete with Victoria 3 remains to be seen, but I'd love to see another contender in this space, particularly one that's trying to give the industrial era grand strategy its own identity. If any of this sounds like your sort of bag, keep an eye on Gilded Destiny and consider adding it to your wish list, and let me know in the comments, does this look like a Victoria 3 rival that you've been waiting for? Is it just another grand strategy game that you think deserves a bit more attention? Let us know. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you on the next one. Bye bye now.